Thank you everybody for showing up here today. My name is Jasmine Henry. I'm the head of machine learning at Motley Fool, as well as the CTO of SID Technologies. Also, I'm a Wasting Technology Fellow here at Stanford. And speaking of really awesome and cool Stanford Fellows, I'm pretty excited today to be hearing from Renata Avila. She'll be speaking today about prototyping feminism AI. She is the co-founder of the A Plus Alliance. As well as that, she's a human rights lawyer who's been specializing in understanding the politics of data and the implications of trade, democracy, and society. So, really excited to hear from her today. For those of you who are interested in asking any questions at the end of the speech, feel free to either click on the QR code that we have on that slide there, or click on the link that we have in our chat to be able to add any questions that you have on Slido that you would like for Renata to answer. Thank you, Renata, for being here. I'll go ahead and hand it off to you.
Jasmine, I cannot think of a better, person introducing me, because I mean, your work goes at the core of all the issues that we'll be discussing today. And let's start. So it has been a very, very, very interesting year, the year of my fellowship here. I mean, my fellowship was supposed to be like a very intense traveling around the world and visiting all, like the diplomatic venues and convincing people that feminist AI was a real possibility and that feminist AI was something that we could code into our systems, into our diplomatic systems, into our technical systems, and into our societies. Well, the plans were changed by life, like it has been a very, very, very hard time for our communities, for our countries. I mean, as we speak, still most of the global South is facing one crisis without precedents. And here I want to pause and send all my solidarity to people in Colombia facing, like a very, very hard time under threat in a combination of political crisis with activists threatened and the crisis of COVID, the same in India, the same in Brazil, and everywhere you look at. And technology was the promise, right? Technology was the promise that allegedly will make things better and we will help us solve this kind of crisis. And we have seen through this crisis how technology didn't respond to the needs of society, how technology was developed in the last 25 years as something very individualistic and as something centered in consumption and not something designed to serve society. So what I have been up to and what is this project about and what we will discuss tonight at this morning at this Prototyping Feminist AI webinar. Well, together with Women at the Table, we co-founded this A Plus Alliance for Inclusive Algorithms. And we were hearing about this problem everywhere. It was 2 years ago that we started, and we heard about this problem everywhere. AI is biased, and we need to correct for these biases that are embedded in the system. And how biases are replicated and amplified by the use of AI, how data sets were biased, how we were really designing technology for exclusion, technology for invisibility of women, for invisibility of some needs from women. And I got, my co-founder Caitlin and I got a little bit impatient because what was missing and what is still missing in this narrative is the possibilities. It is the imagining, not only correcting biases inside the technology that we have today, but what would it look like if we could build feminist AI? And we asked the question to many people because we realized that it is a too complex question just to leave it in the hands of technologists. And that's why we formed the Alliance for Inclusive Algorithms. And the answers that we started getting is basically the last century, all the tech has been built on biases, and the biases scale. And the problem was not only the code or the data sets. The problem is that biases have been installed in each and every part that fits the tech cycle. from the moment you get the money to start a project to the moment that you evaluate the tech being created. From the people signing the loans that will fund the companies to create the technology that we have today, to the moment that technology is being deployed and used. And this cycle is especially, faces even like more challenges when it is the public sector, the one dealing with technology. And the problem that we have is that in the last, and I'm very thankful for that, and it has been a very important work, a very important part of the work, bringing women into the space. And let's teach the girls to code. Let's bring women at the spaces. All this women inclusion effort globally has been very, very helpful in bringing visibility on who is building and designing the tech that we are using. But the problem is that we changed the gender of the architects somehow, but the same construction and design rules were applied, optimization, efficiency, cost, easy deployment as fast as we can, like this very extractive, very accelerated logic of increasing profit, increasing data collection, increasing what some decided were like good systems, and the criteria of a good system have been like those guiding us in recent times. And it is not only, during this time, what we have figured out is not only about bringing women inside design and development rooms, is changing the architecture of the systems, changing and constructing according on testing even new design rules. And another thing that we like, what makes this moment that right now very, very, very good for prototyping feminist AI is that all these biases replicated and amplified by the use of AI are today more visible, and the harm is more tangible than ever. I think that what we have seen in our societies and the questioning, especially in young people, on the technology around us, it was not possible 20 years ago. It was really conversations of very few 10 years ago, but now it's taking off. Last summer, when you saw the UK students protesting against an algorithm, and this year, when we see the first victories, including victories from part of our fellows challenging, surveillance technologies and facial recognition technologies at the city level, we see that something is growing, and a new awareness and literacy and social commitment from young people is also growing. So it is highly likely that the next generation, or maybe in 2 generations of technologists, we will have very different people with a very different set of values and mindset to transform the technologies that we are using today. But what I'm going to try to propose here today, and the conversation I want to have with you, like, among you, I'm very lucky because I have the best and the brightest attending this webinar, and those who are not joining later and watching it later, like I know that your ideas will really, really shape my work. Is how can we move? We identify the problem. We have researched and framed the problem, and we have, like, let's say, the young people, the next generation of technologists on our side, because it is very visible that we have a problem and that we need to correct. But how can we move from just corrective measures to build something better, to build something new, and to build it from scratch? The parting point, we have taken some steps and we stop at some point, and that's where we as an alliance and I, as a fellow, need your help. we started like the first point and the first stop, let's say, was assembling an international interdisciplinary team of leading experts. As we consider, of course, that bringing more women coders is great, that bringing more women engineers is fantastic, but to really reshape and test new models and discover new ways of doing things, we identified that there was a lot of people missing from the room, and so the A+ Alliance started. We co-founded it, and we collected a series of very creative minds, economists, leading, innovation funds, like in getting close to the innovators and all the innovators landscape. Data scientists working with the government, activists, experts working in the international organization systems, architects of those inclusive algorithms that we are like dreaming of implementing. And, engineers, of course, but with a very like a profound, a deep vision of feminist values. So all these brilliant people, we put them together, to start guiding us on how to do this, how to prototype this feminist AI. And then after collecting all the experts, the next step of the alliance was to collect a series of researchers doing, this very, very new and complicated work of linking feminist theory, data practice, and AI. And basically, we collected all, and it will be like a publication that will be like in a couple of months ready. We collected through a series of Zooms because we couldn't meet face to face. We collected again, bright minds, a series of questions that we have on how to make this happen. But it was a lot of theory, some methodologies, and we are still like, okay, we can do more with this group of people, and maybe we need to bring more people in. So you can explore later all the researchers. I mean, there's researchers from most of all over the world, a lot of researchers from the Global South that we have collected on the website. And we are still at the phases, okay, we have a body of research, we have a problem, there's this thing that we can do. We need to figure out how to create, deploy, fund, and sustain feminist AI. And now the question that we have is how can we move from these conversations and words across experts to prototypes? And why do we want to move from research and from conversations and from rejection of the current model to prototypes? Because I think that as the future of feminism and the future of technology need utopias. And we need also to translate that kind of utopia in a reality, to translate, to build an understanding in the people that we are talking to, and show them this is how it looks. This is how feminist AI looks like. And we have no concrete example. We cannot point at a project, like this is like, I guess that we are almost at the same moment that the environmental movement was at some point. We are at that moment where we know that we the same way that the environmentalists in the past knew that they wanted a better, sustainable, green future for the people and the planet. We are at the exact same moment, we are as the environmentalists were practically in the 70s, we are like 2021. We want a future of tech that is feminist, that is inclusive, that it rejects and it accelerates a society that does not have racial and gender bias. On the contrary, we want to accelerate inclusion and improve the life of people. But how will it how will it look like is still in the paper. How will it look like is still in the conversation. And it is, we still cannot like point at examples, concrete examples. If we compare it to the environmentalist movement, for example, you can say like, oh, these are like 20 examples of environmentally friendly sources of energy, or these are like 50 examples of community practices that can lead us to that. But we don't have even at the prototype level examples of how feminist AI will look like. And I think that it is really hard to commit to what you don't understand. And it is really hard to understand to some key actors that we need to convince without showing how it works and showing even in a small scale how it works. So in the past, I have I think that a part of my strong desire of doing that is that in the past I directed an organization that was very into collaborative thinking and creative thinking. And one of the things that I thinking and building things with the community, together with the community. And one of the things that I discovered while going through this process is that we have been advocating very strongly for multidisciplinary teams, but we are still, the privileged in the room. And we are usually, like deciding the tech destinies of people with, okay, a multidisciplinary team, and you have like an anthropologist and a feminist, and you have technologists, but where is the people? And so in prototyping this, one of the first questions is it possible? Is it too utopian? Is it even helpful to plug the communities that this tech is intending to serve into the whole cycle of the technology, not into the conception, into, do I really need this technology? How are you going to build it? How is it going to serve me? How can I make it better? How can I give feedback? And how can how can be part of this prototyping process of the technologies that you are going to like deploy in my communities? The second important thing that when analyzing how can we prototype feminist AI is I think that, and we have a tiny opportunity at the moment that is not even confirmed, but there's hundreds and thousands, if not millions of opportunities for tech startups to prototype things. And if you have a business idea, and if you have a business plan, if you pitch your idea, Silicon Valley, you are like a very, very enthusiastic young person, or a couple of persons trying to pitch a business idea on tech prototype. There's lots of incubators, funds, and ecosystems serving you to try, test, and fail. And what we have discovered all this time, working with my fellow feminists and scholars in the topic, is there's such a little opportunity for the social sector and for feminists and for tech feminists to test and try and fail the same way that the entrepreneurs and that the startups of Silicon Valley do. Like they can break things, they can fail, they can discard. In the social sector, there's very limited space for doing this and for testing these ideas. And ultimately, these are the ideas that are going to transform the world and save us and take us to the next better situation. So in preparing this webinar, I want to make very visible the need that activism and the need that those advocating for tech inclusion, those advocating for feminist AI, those advocating for the next generation of technologies that will remove the patriarchal, dysfunctional society that we have today, we need to be allowed a space of failure and a space of testing and a space of trying and resources to of doing that. And we need also allies I mean, one of the things that I have identified in trying to frame these questions and answer these questions is we know a lot of feminist methodologies. We need to find better bridges to not to be like, just words that an engineer on the other side reads, but how can we really form a new generation of people that understands that this is going to be relevant for all the tech ecosystem when developing AI and ADM systems. And that even just having a different methodology as the starting point can be transformative for these systems. So another of the questions that we have to all the people following this conversation is, what kind of disciplines should we be including, and where are the gaps? Which parts of the design today are failing, and which kind of knowledge is the knowledge that is missing for us to prototype better feminist AI? And this, going back to this point, I really want to make this point very strongly, that if we are not giving the opportunity to prototype this new generation of feminist technologies, and if we do not count on you to help us prototype it, by you, I'm referring to all the disciplines that could contribute to start imagining and playing with different digital futures. All the innovation will always be, an exclusive. Will be exclusive of the for-profit sector, of the business sector, and for very top-down of some governments developments. And I think that this webinar is more of a question, an open question on where and how can make the process of prototyping, that is usually a process belonging to computer scientists and belonging to labs and belonging to architects and data scientists, a process that is also belongs to feminist movements and also belongs to this of creation of new digital futures. And when I think about this, I think that the ideal opportunity that I'm seeing ahead of us very soon is all the process of recovery that we will have after the COVID-19 crisis. Imagine how exciting if we identify where the systems that failed us, and we identify the absence of systems where a system could have fixed a situation where exacerbated gender and race inequalities, and we could bring a different set of actors instead of just tech solutionism, a different set of actors, feminist methodologies and multidisciplinary technologies connected with the communities to prototype something new. That's something that will, a rethinking of the systems will happen in each and every country. Why not seize in the moment? And how can we prototype it better? I think that here is a gap. I think that our feminist tech communities are very new at prototyping. And I think that the classical tech communities have been doing, if I think of Stanford and other universities, have been doing it for a long time. It will be amazing to learn from those practices and adapt those practices when a feminist lenses and develop better, like, you know, like have a proper cross-pollination of spaces to test it better. And the dream basically will be like that, all these prototypes and all this prototyping, very experimental prototyping that we will start in the next, and I'm going to tell you more soon about it, that all this provocation will lead a multidisciplinary movement for feminist AI. And this is the first part, because once we have the prototypes ready, I mean, we will have the first part of the work done, because ultimately what we will need to do is to change the decision process and the design rooms. And it will have a lot to do with technopolitics, but also a lot to do with politics in general. More and more countries are declaring themselves as feminist in their foreign policy. And more countries are taking, like, you know, a strong stance against racism and for gender inclusion. So those are like the ones that we want to say, like, okay, it's nice that you're saying all these things, but what about embedding those principles in your future? And here are this set of prototypes that we can show you, so you can adapt them and adopt them and scale them to, you know, take back the technology power for gender and racial justice. So what are we going to do in the Alliance, and what I'm going to be involved in the Alliance in the next 3 years? So we are almost confirming and almost, that we will be able to prototype this feminist AI in Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East and North Africa in the next 3 years. And these prototypes will lead to pilots. It is still not an official, you know, announcement, but it is our ambition to do it, and we have all prepared for it to happen. And the vision, that vision will be like, you know, like to change the cycle by getting the researchers to do research that can be applied, specifically applied to real life problems at the intersection of gender and race inequalities. And so that research can be taken by another team and transformed into a prototype. And then through a selective process and assessment of political opportunities and so on, we could have by 2024, 2025, at least three successful pilots on the Global South of feminist AI up and running. So we can point at them as maybe success stories, maybe failure stories, but at complete processes where from feminist research to feminist methodologies to prototyping to piloting, a feminist AI vision was tested and tried. Well, that leaves me with more time for questions and interactions with all of you, and I am happy to start the conversation.
Thank you so much, Renata, for that. That was wonderful. So there are a few questions in the chat that I think would be very interesting to hear your answer about. So one of them I think is really great. Someone says essentially they appreciate the focus on the possibility and moving forward beyond correcting both and harm. Prototyping seems like the best way to move forward fast. Will you be sharing examples of prototypes that have taken off and also ones that have not?
That's precisely what we don't have yet. I mean, we couldn't find a single one, you know, like, and it's very new. It's very, very, very new. And that's what makes me excited, because, you know, like, it's, as I was saying, like, it all stops in research. We stop there. And again, I want to make emphasis on the lack of opportunities, especially the lack of opportunities for people in outside the US, basically, and outside the US and Europe, where you don't have funding for innovation, especially when you don't have funding for social innovation to test and try. Because we talk a lot about bias, we talk a lot about ethics, we talk a lot about many things. We write about, I mean, the number of papers written about bias is a lot, but we are given, like it is like the kid that is never given the opportunity to play with Legos or with play with, Play-Doh. We as feminists want to create our own technologies. And if we are not given the opportunity to create, to imagine a tech world, and if the prevalent tech keeps being created by the same, funded by the same, and we don't test new models, I think that it is that's the big point that I want to make here. To move from bias AI to feminist AI, we need to prototype how it's going to look like. And the prototypes are not going to be perfect, but the prototypes will help us understand what is wrong in the way technology is made and how it can be done differently. Of course, there will be like some models that will not be efficient. Of course, will be some models that will be like just for specific communities and serving a specific local communities, and that those might be efficient at that small scale. But not all the systems need to be like one size fits all will not be the solution to turn the page and to really transform biased AI into feminist AI. And so the vision that we have is that we need to start producing the research that will lead us to the prototypes, that will lead us to the pilots, that will lead us to the technology that we dream as that will bring finally gender and race justice all over the world. But I feel that most of the space, especially on the activist side, the practitioner side, where I come from, everything stops in words, and there's very little room for action, except some very, very, very low tech experiments, like for example, bots, or like it is like we are not getting the hands dirty with the hard tech, that we need to fix. And if we don't get deep into it, if we don't experiment, if we don't make mistakes, if we don't fail, if we don't like really push funds for to innovate at a large scale and at a global scale, this is not going to go anywhere. We will be like 10 years later talking about the same.
Yeah. It's so interesting you talk about the fluid relationship between funding and prototypes, because that's something that for me I'm going through, right? So you have this great idea, you do research on it, and I find this happens to a lot of people in AI who want to make it more inclusive. But then you find that a lot of funding is being given to people based off of like their ability to have done well with different startups and different prototypes in the past. But if you're new and you've never done a prototype before, or maybe you have, but it hasn't been within this specific space, that kind of creates this thing where, these funding opportunities are kind of harder to come by. So I was wondering if maybe you could speak to that about how people can, or if if there's any ways that people can try to, get the funding so that they can create a prototype that's good enough to be able to make it to the space where it can be a product that people can actually use.
Like the thing is, what is the incentive, and what is the incentive to give you funds to play and prototype? Is usually profit, and we need to move from that logic, because we do not calculate and we don't account for social loss. Social loss is big, like if you deploy in a country, like imagine imagine today I'm the president of, the mayor of Guatemala City, or the mayor of Kampala, and I deploy this big system to optimize my COVID distribution of vaccines. And that big system has a strong gender bias, and it is given priority to young males because workforce, whatever, and is leaving, you know, lots of young women out of the vaccine stream, or delaying the access of vaccines. Like the like designing and deploying systems with commercial systems with bias is having a tremendous cost in societies all over the world. And nobody accounts. I mean, everybody accounts of the pennies that you saved in this distribution instead of having a human doing it manually. But nobody accounts of the harms on bias systems. And so it will be so efficient to have public interest technology, public interest algorithms that can be optimized for inclusion, because inclusion, like exclusion and inequalities, racial and gender inequalities, they can be even quantified, and they cost our countries and our societies so much every year, you know, like, and so my idea is we need to create a different ecosystem for this kind of tech. An ecosystem that is heavily funded by the public sector, I think, and that has all the support of universities, research centers, you know, like it has a different ecosystem than the ecosystem where a Silicon Valley startup grows and success, because it's serving different, is benefiting society in a different way, you know, like it's not necessarily like, you know, producing, you know, producing the next billionaire. But it is scaling, like, you know, like the benefits of conceiving these different systems are ultimately, like, the private sector is not thinking, obviously, in these systems. They think that the idea, very limited idea of inclusion, racial and gender inclusion, is bringing more women to build with the architectural principles that took us here. So, and so I think that opening this transformative ecosystem, it can start very small, you know, it can start very small, and having as allies cities, having as allies, you know, the social sector. I think that all the feminist movement, you know, like if all the feminist movement rallies behind a new, instead the Silicon Valley, a feminist valley of tech, why not, you know, like I think that can really like inspire a new generation of technologies working for public interest, and inspire maybe, you know, a new generation of venture philanthropists investing in those. I'm sorry if my answer was too long, but that's the way I see it. You know, it's an ecosystem that we need to create an ecosystem for these new technologies to be conceived, cultivated, tested, and then deployed.
Yeah. So the next question we have comes from Laura. She says, as a student, how could I get involved in the community? And also, do you have a concrete example of a feminist methodology? Could I apply this methodology to my own projects?
Well, I don't have I have in the publication that we are like going to release, there's a whole section of methodologies. I think that, but I also am very curious of co-authoring and co-creating with this new generation of students that are like just getting in, and different methodologies for this new prototyping, you know, like because I think that we have lots of feminist methodologies from the past that need updating and adapting to the right now. So in terms of methodologies, I think that and collaboration, I think that can be a great intersection. How can you get involved? I mean, I put my contact details, of course, but I think that we need to instigate these spaces of creation inside our universities. I mean, if I was back in university, and I'm doing this at Stanford, of course, but if I was back in school, you know, like it is necessary that not all the innovation goes in this logic. We need to go put tech innovation back into the public sector, and we should go back to this, imagining this tech infrastructure at the very foundation of the future that we want to create, And we talk a lot of, I mean, in the US and in Europe and in different parts, it's together with recovery, something that I forgot to mention is there's a lot of discussion about Green New Deal.
Yeah.
What is going to be our tech New Deal, our feminist tech New Deal? That's also a very important question that we need to ask ourselves.
Yeah. So now I'm going to ask a question from Melina. She says, how can a young AI engineer help you and be part of your mission?
Oh, wow. Well, join, let me tell you more details about this project. I mean, again, it's not confirmed, but we hope that we are going to go ahead. Basically, imagine you have researchers from the global south. You pick your region, for example, Middle East and North Africa, and they're starting to write their papers, and they have lots of questions, and they want to co-design with you those prototypes that are going to serve their communities. I think that this exchange, being helping with your skills and your state-of-the-art knowledge, helping this, becoming part of these multidisciplinary groups, it is something I see happening. Because and the interesting thing is that we have very limited secured fund, very little limited secured funds, and AI engineers are super expensive,
Yeah.
And so it will be quite exciting to open up the possibility, open up the possibility of those who couldn't, because only few papers will be selected to be to the next phase of prototypes. If those who didn't get selected get kind of time sponsorship to actually help and also include them in the prototype phase through the assistance and support of students and practitioners out there. I think that's one way, and I will say that the other way is start prototyping yourself, get in your neighborhood, get an interesting group of women and start interviewing them. What do they think of the technology around them? I think that that's something that we never ask, as engineers. So we are I mean, my mother is one, so I'm familiar with the dynamics, It's all about the tech, it's never about the people. So we need to look the people around us and look how we are serving them and how can we serve them better and how can we embed possibilities into the technology that we are coding, basically.
Yeah. Shifi asked, how could we look beyond private companies and imagine alternative ways to design products or structures that are not profit-driven but allow people to thrive? Can we AI out of automatic exploitation?
I think that, I have been looking as part of different things. I'm doing the cooperative model and the platform cooperative model, and also mixed funding, when imagine a cooperative serving the public sector. Imagine if instead of having the big tech giants getting all the money to get bigger and bigger and bigger and dominate absolutely all the tech, we will have more cooperatives of tech communities plugged into the local, serving the community, crafting the tech the communities need, instead of just keeping this this bad one size fits all. One size fits all means the one size fits all technology, which is what we have today, means that all those who do not fit in that model are out, are invisible, are deleted from it. And so that's our fight, I would say, for feminist AI. The fight for feminist AI is not a fight of replacing one dominant model with other, is connecting those who code the tech and the communities that the tech serves, so everybody is included and served with justice and fairness, and it's possible to do it. It's just a change in the rules of the game, and is it can be started like at a very small scale. It can be started, like as the environmentalists started, at the city, park, and quality of air and my community level, like I think that it can be it is the task that we have ahead is a movement building task more than transforming the private sector task.
Yeah. What you just said actually, it made me think of something that I've been wondering for a while. So there is this piece written by a bunch of professors, Dr. Peters, Dr. DeBrew, and a few other people who I'm blanking on, but I don't want to miss out that there's other people who wrote this paper as well. It's called On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots. And essentially it's this paper where they're talking about language models and they're examining the, I guess you would probably consider these societal harms of having language models that are too large, particularly when it comes to the environment, being environmentally costly, but also being able to like incorporating more bias within the models that is pretty much scaling bias, as you mentioned within your speech a little bit earlier. And I'm wondering, going outside of the paper is mainly about, the natural language processing space, which is the space that I feel most comfortable research-wise. But even going outside of that space, I've been wondering, is there, and I kind of want to get your idea on this, is there a space where we should focus on making sure that models are being built with data being collected locally, and that these models are built only to, I guess, to handle a local environment, a local community, as opposed to being national or global models? Like, is the problem where we begin to incorporate these large global models that don't have an understanding of the communities that they serve that cause the most harms, or will these harms be present regardless of the size of the people making it, unless we were to make, more changes?
It is a very hard question, but I think that I think that health is an interesting one. Is health, because of all the, health is very rooted to the community where you are at. It is influenced by the cultural composition of your the environment. We fail to see health issues as something that is closely connected to where you live, your predispositions that are on genetics, affected by the environment, affected by poverty, affected by it's very rooted on the local and where you are right now. And I think that this kind of that data sets are very, very interesting. I mean, you have seen right now with the vaccines deployment, and how one size fits all didn't fit all, and how I think that's an interesting data set that big pharma needs it to be super uniform and super standardized. It is, I think that we will go through, if with these spatialized, models and AI, maybe we will discover the missing link and the connection with the traditional practices and the knowledge commons that live inside the communities, and these undigitized data sets, somehow undigitized data sets of the local knowledge, and the new data sets being produced, that for the first time you can measure so many factors of a space. That might help us, accelerate better healthcare and better preventive healthcare measures for communities in different parts of the world, and connect the health of your environment and personal health and communal health and practices. And I think that this holistic approach, that's one that comes on top of my mind. And one that will be very interesting. And also the other is learning processes. I think that and that connected to early education I think that's another one that is very interesting, that cannot be standardized, that it responds again to local dynamics, cultural dynamics, and that it has been tried to being forced to standardize globally, like, so yeah, those two examples I think of. And of course, injecting a little bit of feminist values on it. So we make sure that patriarchy that many of our cultures have suffered from is eradicated from it.
Yeah. Nancy asked, please provide a specific example of AI and how it will work differently if feminist perspective is applied, or how the process of uprooting the biases is improving the approach and development around AI.
Well, I hope that I got the example correctly. For example, different model. Of course, we haven't prototyped it, but in on top of my head, like if you're thinking of feminist AI that will, allocate funds for recovery in a community, if it was designed according to feminist principles, it will involve and listen to and make sure that intersectional women are served with fairness in the distribution and allocation of those funds, and that the metrics to measure the results of those funds being allocated will not be ones of just efficiency and cost, but will look at, like benefits in society as a whole, and the impact that those funds have in the lives of people beyond just super planned, super like, square-minded interventions. Of course, that's just representatives, for example. How can you make sure that the way that you're selecting your representatives in response to it is not just putting women at the top, but is which women are you putting at the top, and are those women reflecting truly representing the community that you are like you're trying to highlight. And yeah, the second part of the question, I think I didn't answer because I was complex.
It's how the process. So I'll start from how is the process of uprooting the biases, improving the approach and development around AI?
We don't know yet. We will see. We will see.
Yeah.
That process is to be determined. And I guess that, one of the things that made me like nervous and hopeful and curious is because we have like, and there's another project in Africa doing it, but our three teams are like Latin America, and Latin America is many Latin Americans in one continent. It's not uniform at all. Different realities, different cultures, different access levels to education, different readiness. And the same is in the Middle East, because in the Middle East and North Africa, you have super rich countries with top AI development, and also like, there's many inequalities within each region and cultural complexities, and the same in Asia, like, and then you have cosmovisions, and you have ways of seeing feminism that are very like that. We agree on gender equality at the core of it, but the manifestations and the translations of it will be very different in each region. So I'm very curious to see how feminist AI, how a prototype of feminist AI looks like in a Caribbean country in LAC, or in a Middle East, country of the top, super developed, but at the same time very, very restrictive on women's rights, and one in Asia. So I think that this will be like a trip, like, because we will be prototyping feminist AI and embedding certain biases on it as well. So I think that it will be like because of the cultural differences and having all the people in the same room from different cultures and from different regions, it would be like the perfect lab that might even lead us to discovery of better methods to identify other type of biases, and identify the moment when the bias gets into the system, and how in these prototyping processes we will get better at identifying those, and maybe identifying more efficient ways of removing those.
Yeah, yeah. This is great. I'm going to ask one last question.
Yeah.
It's from Shakshi. Please let me know if I pronounce your name incorrectly. I apologize. But Shakshi asked, I wonder if you have thoughts on how we can drive inclusion for women when some barriers are completely unrelated to tech, like social norms preventing women from engaging on anything digital, especially in developing countries.
I think that, like one of the things that I think that will be very important on this is the multidisciplinarity of this. And even if we cannot bring, I mean, ideally we will have like, ideally the way that I see it is, for example, we want to launch, create an interactive AI system to get girls more enthusiastic about AI. I don't know, like something like that, and have the time to talk to the girls that is trying to serve, but I know that that's a little bit utopia and needs a lot of resources. So ideally, like, we will have people really know, like, a social scientist, really knowing and studying and understand. They might not know anything about tech, but they might have been studying the communities and studying inclusion the last 10 years. We need to hear them while designing the systems, trying to correct and trying to include. And I think that that's what we have failed to achieve. And social sciences cannot no longer be divorced from computer science and from those designing the business models and from those designing the, like it all needs to go hand in hand. And well, that will be my answer. Like, my answer is multidisciplinarity. The pace has to be like, sometimes it's not just move fast and break things. It's like maybe we need, the idea of feminist AI is move slower, include everybody, listen to everybody, bring more views to the table, and try to observe when this happens, and instead of break things, build things, plant things, seed things, and that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you so much, Renata, for this talk today, and also thank you so much to everybody else for attending. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon.